Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah C. Avignoni.
bringing you this week's Ascended World. So happy Monday morning.
Good morning, Nicole.
Morning, Nicole. Yeah. Well, the storm keeps on brewing or flowing or whatever for many. And we were talking last week about the shadow side. Actually, how did we even get there?
Well, we were looking at being triggered by something and then seeing it as a piece of ourselves that we had to express on someone else to be able to then see it, which is, that whole wholeness thing. And then looking at it from the perspective of, okay, so what about that triggers me and I push away from me? So that means I judge it and I want it separate from me, but yet it's a part of me.
Yeah, I know it's so funny because I'm just so blanking about. We had talked about the compliments of the shadow in our shadow section of the Wonder Vision Board course, which is still available if you'd like to take it.
Right. As well as part of Wonderland.
Yes.
In a whole
We have a whole
28-day
course
itself.
Yeah.
28 element, I should say.
Yes. Good morning, Yasmin. Yes. So we did a lot of talk on shadow, but we did speak specifically of complementing the shadow in the Wonder Vision Board course, because we were talking about looking at it differently in our creations, right? So what we got to a point of being tired of the smack in the face, right? With the contrast of shadow. And that's why we tend to judge it so much, because it feels like a smack in the face often, right? When we look into a dramatic piece, we were looking at pieces that cause drama in our lives, or there's a yawn already. Irritate us, upset us, limit us, whatever, right? And so we were like, well, wait a second though, because if we are to move forward, so what we got to the point of saying is, well, we are the shadow. We are a shadow, right? I mean, we're just an expression, a shadow expression of the divine in separation, right? So we never really call ourselves shadows, funny enough.
But if you really think about it, that's the only way we can be here.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So our entire existence is, as an individual, is a shadow, because the ego has to do with the exploration of separation, exclusion, identity, which means there's a shadow. There is none of that without a shadow.
Right. And essentially, if you're not a shadow, you aren't in separation.
Right. So you're not here.
Right.
And we've enjoyed that. We enjoy this. We have created identities, such an identity around shadowing, right? Shadowing. That's funny. But what we started talking about was, well, okay, so here's the thing. We look at the shadow as something opposite, right? We look at the yin yang, the black and white, and opposite.
Good, the bad, the
equal and opposite kind of thing.
Right.
And it's like, okay, what if we shifted our perspective to, because you and I got into the conversation of, okay, because if we eliminated that entirely, we wouldn't exist.
Exactly.
Right. So until we complete what we came here,
at least in separation, we wouldn't exist.
Well, we as individuals would not exist.
Right.
Because as an individual, we're separate. So, right. So then it's like, okay, so reality wise, if we are to exist here, we can't just eliminate the shadow altogether if we want to continue, because it's saying, well, I exist and I don't exist, right? which, I mean, it's true, but at the same
It
time,
keeps that constant push,
Yeah.
pull, push, pull, push, pull.
yes. Well, and we go back to that discussion of the original separation kind of thing, is the perception of a me and not me, right?
Right.
And that's the shadow, which is what we are, is saying I'm a not divine. I am not just the whole. I am an
Instead
individual.
of this being the divine and something else being the not divine,
Right. Right.
we are actually the not divine from the wholeness.
The perceive, which is where we get the perception of not being good enough, not being blah, blah, blah,
Right.
blah, 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 blah. Except it's like, no, we are always wholly divine. It's that we've chosen to create this identity and separation to have this experience from a much different perspective, right? So,
Right.
and it so when you look at a whole being, right? So look at our bodies. So our cells have consciousness of their own, right?
Right.
Our organs have consciousness of their own, right? And they're made up of cells that all have their own consciousness. And then we run on a consciousness of this physical body, which, and then it gets, the way I understand it gets bigger, more concentric. So we don't say it's this or that. We say it's this and that, right? We start including. And when we say this or, so like to me, when you say this or that, you're saying it's yin or yang, right?
Yeah,
Black or
mutually
white.
exclusive,
Right,
one or the other,
right. Black or white, good or bad.
up
And
or
there's
down.
and there's no such thing as any extreme of any of that, except if we choose for it to be, right?
Right.
So we were looking at, because we're like, okay, if we're still to and I was like, I lost my train of thought. There was a reason I brought all that up. So when you look at the whole physical body, right, we have universes within ourselves. We have universes within those universes. So we have such a hologram of infinite consciousness within one physical body of separation,
Right.
that we just forget. And we also exist in multiple dimensions going out concentrically, right? And it's not just in a 3D manner. This is in a holographic multidimensional manner. So when we talk about the multidimensional universe, the multiverse, right? It's creating this hologram. Well, when we say something is black or white, we are making it so flat on a piece of paper, right? And we're ignoring that there's all the stuff around it. And all the stuff around it is what makes up the whole picture. It's like if you pull out on Earth and you see a planet, there's a planet.
Right. Right.
But as you get closer, it's like, oh, well, the planet's made up of elements. It's made up of pieces. It's made up of different forms of consciousness, different expressions of consciousness that make up the whole of that planet's energy or that vibration. Or when they do the music of the spheres, and they talk about each planet has its own like
Right.
optimal note, right?
Right.
Or chord,
Right.
right? That's what we are in a hologram, right? So if we say we're just black and white, we're missing the point.
Right. Right.
And so it's not that, so that's what we were talking about. It's like, well, because if we just say that, okay, we're just going to eliminate that entirely, well, then there will be nothing here. It will just be all back whole and without the hologram of separation and multiversal separation. So that's what we were talking about. Well, but it's more like a complement, right?
Well, and that complement is what makes the symphony go, essentially. What makes the universe the universe.
Yes, yes.
It's what makes it all of this. And
Yes.
it's the mastery of our creation.
Yes. 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 And so when we start looking at it from that more, positive perspective, instead of saying, oh, that's awful, I'm done with this, which is what we want to do, right?
Right.
Oh, there's my yawn again. It's to say, how does this complement my journey? Complement, meaning it has a purpose in separation to show me something I haven't seen or remembered.
Right.
It's something that's showing me another dimension of the hologram that I'm forgetting because I'm only looking at it in a flatter fashion, right? It's it's adding depth to my experience as well.
That it's a new dynamic, because
Yes.
every time things are created in a different way, even with one little thing changed, it's something different,
Mhm.
something we may not have even looked at.
Right. So the challenge that we have is we have decided to judge the shadow, what we consider the shadow, right? Or the opposite, or the not me, or the exclusion, however you want to word it, right? Or the evil, or the wrong,
Right.
you know?
Right. What I've chosen to not be me.
Yes. So that we've forgotten that we get so stuck in the energy of that and pushing it away that we've forgotten that it is simply a facet of the sparkling, bajillion multiversal gemstone that we've created to say, okay, what beauty is that bringing in the hologram?
Exactly. What note is that expressing?
Yes.
Right.
Okay. Now it's always easy to say in terms of practicality, and when we're doing stuff, that's when it comes down to, well, when you're really angry, or you're really upset, or you are really sad, right?
Or you're really focused in a direction and it knocks you back, or makes you question that direction you're headed in, or challenges your core belief,
Yeah.
or who you think you are.
Yep.
That's the really tough one.
Yep. That's a challenging thing, because then the ego wants to exclude it and push it away because it doesn't feel good,
Right.
because of how we judge, right? So it's like, okay, well, when we look at something as we have failed at something, right? There's a big one.
Right.
Failed at being a parent, or a friend, or a business person, or whatever.
Spouse,
Spouse. Yeah.
partner.
We forget to look at the color in the spectrum, right? So when we're talking about compliments, we're talking about the color wheel, right? So when you look at the color wheel, it's all compliments that make up the whole prism of light, right? And so it's funny, because many, like you and I got into this whole discussion, many have this perception that black is actually all the colors together, but it's actually light that's all the colors together, because that's where a prism comes from. It pulls, the rainbow comes from, it pulls out the colors into these different into the different pieces of the spectrum. And so it's like, so that's all part of the shadow. All the colors are part of the shadow, right? So if we think about what we would remove if we removed all the colors out of our existence. And then it just became black and white.
Void.
And then it just became the void beyond that. Yeah.
Right.
Not, yeah. Just because the void is the lack of everything, right? So
Right. Or everything and nothing all simultaneously.
well, I was saying the unlimited potential of creation. That's how I always look at the void, right?
Right.
Is the energy of unlimited, creation, the potential. That's a challenging thing for us to wrap our minds around. But I feel like this is where we're stuck right now, or not stuck, but we're pushing it on. Yeah, we're pushing in our own faces right now, educating everyone.
Right. Well, and I think just coming to the realization that it's a complement, not an exclusivity.
Right.
And that that comes back to just simply embracing the wholeness of it all, and hinges on changing your judgment about it. Whether your judgment is, okay, so everything's good. Well, okay, so that makes everything just is.
Right. Everything just is.
Right.
Yeah. Perfect in its placement. Right. It's like I love the color spectrum thing, the color wheel thing, because it's a great visualization in your mind. I mean, if you just look at, say, blue and purple, right? So blue and purple on their own.
Right.
And not blue and purple, blue and red on their own.
But together they're purple.
are very distinct colors, and then when they put together they make purple, something completely different. Well, that's what we're doing, is the whole spectrum comes together to create that wholeness, right? And we've split it apart, and we're all, say, different colors of the $1 billion, the billion color wheel,
Right. And and thinking of that in terms of the 7 essences, we've spoken a lot about, if you think about adding the forgiveness and coming to a place of gratitude, only then can you see the purple.
Right.
You allow it to come into its fullness of existence.
Yeah. Sometimes the challenge is getting to really what the forgiveness is about.
Right. Well, and most of the time I find that it's forgiveness for judging it for being something other than what it is.
Right. And expectation.
Right. Whether it's coming to that judgment through an expectation, or coming to that judgment through a belief, or a value, or something you come to define yourself as, or even a misunderstanding. It's once you change that judgment about it, it opens the door to all possibilities.
Yes. Yes. And it's, we stop at the judgment. That's the challenge. That's the problem that we have, is we stop at the judgment, and we don't look beyond it. Right. So it's not that we aren't to ever judge, because we have an ego, and as long as we have an ego, we're going to judge. Right. But the key is to be conscious of that judgment, and to say, or observant of that judgment, to say, okay, so, all right, I'm going to give myself the moment. I'm going to let myself judge it. Now I'm going to put that judgment on the shelf, and I'm going to say, what is this here to show me in compliment?
Right. Right. And if you look at a judgment as in, like, for instance, if you look at something and go, that's just not for me, my judgment is that's just not for me. That's totally different than complete rejection. And you look at it from a different perspective of, I can judge that it's not for me. However, from an expanded perspective, I can see where it fits, where its place is within the wholeness and within the completion. And I can have gratitude for its existence, whether I allow it to be part of who I am.
Yep. Yeah. And it's, I'm saying from personal experience of stuff going on now, is there are some things we have a really hard time getting past that judgment.
Right. Right. Because we've relied so much on the judgments to get us where we are.
Yeah. Well, it's propulsion, right?
Right.
Propelled us in one direction or another.
Right.
Versus, and we do so much of that with each other, with people, right? With others around us, especially those closest to us. Then it's like, well, we never make a choice. So here's the thing, that's another really tricky thing. We never make a choice about a relationship or somebody else or whatever. It's not really ever about them. It's only the choice that we're making for ourselves, right?
Right.
So we could say, I'm doing this because that person did this, or I'm leaving here because of this, or I'm staying here because of this. Nope, you're not. You're not staying for your kids. You're not staying for your spouse. You're not staying for whatever. Right. You're staying for you.
Right.
For whatever purpose you choose.
Right. Which reminds me of the phrase, well, I just didn't have time for that. Well,
right.
That's not the case. You always have the same amount of time. You didn't make that a priority within the time you had.
Right. And that's okay too, right? We tend to judge that, right? But and I've said that to so many about, like, okay, instead of saying I didn't have the time, you just say it wasn't my priority, right? And then like, oh, well, that hurts. And it's like, well, it's the truth though.
And it's no different from saying, oh, I just didn't have time.
Right. It's no different. It's really what you're saying. But it seems to smack us in the face more,
Right.
So yeah, so that's what is there for us to look at this week. This is a challenging like stuck point for I think all of us in different ways. It just depends on.
Right. Well, and I mean, if you look at the collective, the raging polarity just says, if I accept that you might be right, then that's the death of me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's coming to that boil that we talk about right before it changes state into steam, to where if we come to that place of acceptance, then we come to a new place.
Yes.
And in staying in the polarity, we can stay in that fear because it provides the propulsion.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what we've built this entire existence on.
Right.
I know we've come back to this several times, and the question is always, so then how do we exist free of propulsion, right? In a symphony created.
Well, and that's right. And that's essentially treating all of this just like a ride on a roller coaster, like, because if you get to a place where you enjoy the invoked reactions and sensory perceptions that you get on a roller coaster ride, but yet you don't judge it as good or bad, or, I mean, it's
right.
We've got the ticket to ride, let's ride. And by seeing things as complementary and perfect and everything is all as it should be, that's the ticket to ride. Now let's choose to move forward that way.
Right. 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 And what happens when we get irritated is when we feel like, or we believe we've said, all right, I'm ready to ride, but then you keep on hitting the brick wall because you can't seem to get on it. And it's like, wait, what happened? And that's really what I've been going through. It's like a brick wall kind of thing of going, I don't understand where this is coming from. So whatever, but that's where a lot of us, I know many are doing the same thing right now. Many are coming to stuck points, things that, and most of it, and the gratitude about it is we have cleared out so much around the core issues of so many things, right? That the core issues are all that's being left, right? So then what happens is we just keep on hitting on the core issue, which feels like the brick wall because it's the thing that we've avoided the most, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And it keeps coming up with different, costumes on. So it's trying to present itself differently so we can finally recognize it.
Yep. So, and it, it feels heavy. The ego goes, oh, I don't want to look at it because it's like, oh, but because it's what the ego has chained itself to with, without looking at it for so long.
Right.
So it's, when we start saying, okay, so how does this complement my journey? Like, what is it showing me? What is it adding in the spectrum of multi-dimensionality, right? And it might not come to you right away. It might come in different, like little pieces, like you're saying, it comes in different costumes, right?
Right.
So, yeah. So we have as many questions as we have answers here on this. Yeah.
Well, we are talking about the collective, so there are as many answers as there are paths up the mountain.
Absolutely. So the key for us, I think, this week is simply setting ourselves to be able to see that any stuck points, anything that feels like a shadowy judgment, right?
Right.
To be able to see it for the complement that it is in the spectrum. If you think the color wheel, the whole spectrum, it makes up the whole spectrum of light. So if you say, okay, so what is it showing me that would in depth that I would not otherwise see? Instead of spending all your time judging it, I'm tired of this, I'm done, or or that person is
so over
this person's a jerk, or these people are jerks, or like the one I seem to hear from a lot of people these days is, you people, blah, 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 about different. And it's like, yeah, but when you hear yourself say that, it's to step back and say, okay, I'm giving my ego the moment, and then to say, So you people are me, right? And so, and it's funny, it was so big this weekend. Everybody I talked to was like, I heard so many judgments like come up, and I'm just like, why do you feel so exclusionary about that?
Right. Right. Or threatened.
Right.
Because the louder it gets, the more it's evident that you feel threatened by what they
Or
are.
triggered, it triggered in some way. Yeah.
Right. Right.
So it's interesting. Interesting. There's been a conversation that happened at the dinner table last night that I'm sort of sitting on going, oh, there's more depth to that it's important to look at, but I haven't quite gotten, because it has to do with that. It's that circle that so many get into about this exclusionary thing, right? And who's outside of them and the judgment of the people outside of them, but then not engaging in any different behavior than
Right.
they're judging, right?
Oh, exactly. Exactly.
And it's like, okay. So that's that stuff that, we talk about as a reflection to ourselves. So it's the more you're triggered, the more is to look inside,
Absolutely.
And I feel like I have more and more conversations these days with different people who get really, really heated and passionate about something, but they have no desire to do anything to change it.
Right.
It's almost like they want no propulsion. They have the memory of no propulsion necessary, and yet they're driven by it, and they judge it at the same time, kind of thing.
Right.
It's this constant friction, and I think that's part of where we feel like we're in a quagmire, like a standstill, societally.
Standoff.
And yeah, that's true. There's a lot of standoffs going on. So
Right.
this is all, and it's all the same thing. It's all looking at, why do you think that? Why do you judge that? Why are you so triggered by it?
Why do you experience it that way?
Right.
I love when something comes up and takes me by surprise. I always like to step back and ask myself, why did I choose to experience it that way?
Mm-hmm.
What in this served me?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, and then the ego gets grumbly, because then usually it means it turns the mirror back on yourself.
Right.
Having is evidence of wanting.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly.
All right. Well, let's do our clearing. Our clearing is, I guess, will be on having that consciousness to be able to see our judgments as more of a compliment versus an exclusion, like being able to see that, to remember what that is, to know how that works, to make it productive and expansive for us, and remembering the hologram versus being propelled by it, by the need for exclusion, the need for pushing it away.
Well, and I think coming to that place of acceptance and peace with knowing that we are the shadow.
Made that too.
I think
Definitely.
that's pretty big.
Right. Because we're not used to saying that we are the shadow. I am the shadow. Well, and that goes back to, it's funny because when we talked about this, I don't know, 2 years ago or whatever, having to do in the context of that show, Stranger Things. You remember the upside down world?
Right.
And I was like, I think this is the upside down world. And that's truly all of this, an expression is. It is truly the shadow. So yeah, so coming to to accept and have gratitude for, the understanding and remembrance that we are the shadow, looking at our shadow, looking at ourselves, kind of thing. It makes me think of the funhouse mirrors, with the endless, reflections down the line, kind of thing.
Right.
Mirrors opposing each other. So yeah, being able to see that, because when you see that, you can see the hologram better, right?
Right. And you come to a different place of acceptance about everything around you too.
Yes. Yes. Because then it's not a good or bad or whatever. It's just saying it is all part of the complement of the wheel, the hologram that we created, the multiverse kind of thing. Seeing it's each piece's purpose for its existence, with gratitude and love, acceptance, all that. All right, let's go do, shall we? Everybody close your eyes, take a deep breath, be comfortable, as you open your heart. We open our heart and step out of separation back in wholeness and oneness as we hold ourselves at the vibration where that is our truth, experience, and where we exist. All right. Yeah, I just started getting into that and floating away out there. And then I was like, where are we? Wait.
I really could have just stayed. That was.
Because in the beginning, there was like chatter, 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 chatter. And this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is wrong, and chatter, 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 chatter. And how can you like that? You know, how can we look at this? And then all of a sudden it just stopped. And it made me think of in the Matrix when Neo in the end like holds his hand up with all the bullets that are like in the air.
Right.
And up and then they all drop to the floor. That's exactly what happened, was all this chatter. And it was almost like it went and it just stopped. And then it just fell to the ground and it started sparkling, almost like it was a carbonated liquid kind of thing, right?
Right.
And then it sort of reformed. This was really cool. It reformed and it came together. And I was looking into it like this beautiful opalescent like mixture of different like colors, right? And then I said, oh, this looks really familiar. This looks like something I know. What is it? And then all of a sudden I realized it looked like labradorite, you know, the gemstone labradorite.
Right.
And then it was like, I put my hands on it and it just like my third eye went, and I was like, oh, look at how that all connected together. That was crazy. I was like, and I saw this huge spectrum of just color just sort of exploded. And then I was like, oh, I can sit here all day.
Right.
Now I can, then it was like, oh, then it became a game. Like, okay, what else can I put together and see it for what it is, you know? And
Yep.
that was very cool. Very cool.
Yep. I saw, oh gosh, now let's see if I can pull it back in what I saw. In looking at myself as the shadow, it's like I felt literally catapulted into like a whole different place of creation. Like, oh, look at what I can do from here.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And then it was assessing where others are in terms of that to see how their creations are coming together. And it was such a different place. And, you know, I want to say a different kind of judgment. I guess it was more observation.
Yeah.
But I was like, I could have easily gotten lost out there. There was so much to do, all while being.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah. And then I was like, oh, this is a new game I can play.
Right.
Like,
Yes.
This is so much more fun. Yeah. That was cool. Playing with the Matrix in a different way.
Right.
That we created, of course. So, yeah. All right. Well, everybody sit on that this week because that's going to be, I feel like, a big theme, or it is a big theme for many right now. So, and moving forward. And remember, like, you know, just because it's February doesn't mean it's too late to do a vision board, like, you know, focus your energies into the cycle ahead. Because we did talk back in like November, December, how we felt like it really things weren't gonna really shift until like the end of January. And it's sort of like, that's what's just starting to happen. So,
Right.
we have many who are saying, oh, well, you know, I'm ready to do a vision board now. It's like, well, that's why we did the course the way we did, because we have our Wonder Vision board course online on Ascended World, and ascendedworld.net. And you can take that, it's self-paced, and we have a private Facebook group that you can join and we can have discussions about, you know, what's going on. I'm still doing mine. So
Right. I'm still working on mine.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that spiraling through it.
Yes.
And allowing it to expand. And this should be great to add to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. So thanks for joining us. We will see you next week. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avagnoni
signing off with this week's Ascended World. Have a great one.